If you sat at a kitchen table in the 1980s, you remember the sound a TV dinner foil tray made against the oven rack. You remember the casserole crusted with crushed potato chips and the cream of mushroom soup poured straight from the can. Number 19 on this list was on 3 out of 4 American tables on a Wednesday night in 1984. Number 13 fed a working mother and 4 kids for under $5 a pan. Number 4 on this list was the recipe Betty Crocker printed in millions of pamphlets and that nobody under 50 has cooked in 30 years. The decade started with one casserole and ended with another. Then the country quietly stopped passing them down. Then hit subscribe and let's roll the tape, because here are 60 forgotten dinners that disappeared after the 1980s. Number 17, pasta and peas. You diced a potato, diced half an onion, fried them in olive oil until soft, dumped in a can of peas with its liquid, added water to cook a half-pound of rigatoni. A woman named Clara Canucciari grew up eating it in upstate New York during the Depression and made it famous on YouTube at age 91 before she passed at 98. She said pasta was the crutch her family leaned on when there was no meat for the table, no money for the rent, and no light at the end of the calendar. The potato thickens the broth. The pea liquid salts the sauce. The pasta holds on to everything. 40 cents in 1934. $2 and change today. Cheaper than fast food? Better than fast food. Clara cooked the pasta directly in the pea water because the starch and the canning salt built a glossy sauce without butter. She made it the way her grandmother had on a wood stove. Number 19, Salisbury steak TV dinner. 1 ground beef patty in dark brown gravy, a scoop of mashed potatoes, a square of corn, and a brownie compartment sealed in an aluminum tray and slid into a Swanson box. Swanson introduced its Salisbury steak dinner in 1962. By the middle of the decade, frozen TV dinners were on the menu in millions of American homes once or twice a week, eaten on metal trays in front of Bonanza or The Ed Sullivan Show. Families stopped trying to make Salisbury steak from scratch because the frozen one came out the same every time. The homemade version, a Wednesday night patty smothered in mushroom gravy, faded inside 10 years. When TV dinners faded in the 1980s, the dish faded with them. The brownie compartment was the first thing the kids ate and the last thing anyone remembers. You can still buy a Salisbury steak frozen dinner today, but the gravy tastes like a copy of a copy. Creamed dried beef had a nickname men who'd served never quite stopped using. Unsuitable for cookbooks, but right at home in kitchens where someone had learned to cook on a military budget. The recipe: a small jar of armored dried beef soaked briefly in cold water to pull back the salt, torn into pieces, folded into a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, black pepper, ladled over toast. The toast had to be properly done, golden, not pale, because the sauce soaked through soft bread in 40 seconds flat, and everyone who'd made it more than once knew to watch the toaster. The jar cost about 20 cents. The flour and milk cost almost nothing. It was the meal of men who'd come home from service and never quite returned to spending money the way civilians did, carrying a wartime economy through the 1950s and into the 60s on a budget that existed only in their own kitchens. The jars have retreated to specialty shelves now, waiting for someone who still knows what they're for. Before a mandolin appeared in any kitchen you ever stood in, there was a sharp knife and patient slicing, because the thinner the potato, the more surface there was to absorb the sauce, and the more surface, the better the dish. Ham and scalloped potatoes did not come from a cookbook. They came from the Monday after Easter, when half a bone-in ham still sat in the refrigerator. Thin sliced potatoes first, diced ham and sliced onion, a second potato layer, then a simple roux sauce, butter and flour, then whole milk whisked until thick, salt and black pepper, covered low for an hour, uncovered for the last 20 minutes to brown. The rule: if the knife passed through the top layer without resistance, it was done. No thermometer, just the knife. By the 1940s and 50s, this was one of the most reproduced casseroles in Midwestern home economics programs, a model of cost-efficient protein extension that turned a weekend ham into a weeknight centerpiece without either losing dignity. Tomato gravy over biscuits was summer's answer to milk gravy, using the garden's overflow when fresh tomatoes hung heavy on the vine. Grandma would chop ripe tomatoes roughly, not measuring, just eyeing what the meal needed, then cook them down in bacon drippings until they broke apart into thick sauce. Sugar was added by the pinch to cut the acid, flour by the handful to thicken, salt and pepper by instinct alone. The gravy turned a beautiful sunset orange, chunky in some spots, smooth in others, depending entirely on how Grandma felt that morning. She spooned it hot over fresh buttermilk biscuits, the tomato juice soaking into the flaky layers. This dish appeared during tomato season only, when the garden produced faster than families could eat or preserve. There was no winter version, no substitute, just the brief window when homegrown tomatoes made this possible. The recipe died with the grandmothers who never wrote anything down, trusting their daughters would watch and remember. Leftover pintos never went to waste in a mountain kitchen, not when you could mash them, shape them into patties, and fry them in a hot skillet until the outside turned crisp and the inside stayed soft and warm. Bean cakes were the second life of a pot of soup beans, made the day after the original meal when the beans had thickened overnight in the refrigerator or on the back of the stove. You mashed them with a fork, mixed in a handful of cornmeal or flour to hold them together, and fried them flat in bacon grease. During the Depression, when a 12-cent bag of dried pintos could feed a family for 3 days, bean cakes extended that to 4. The first day was soup beans with cornbread. The second day was bean cakes fried for supper. Nothing wasted, nothing thrown out. Every calorie pulled from that single bag of dried beans. The cornmeal crust gave them a crunch the original beans never had, and that crunch made it feel like a different meal entirely. Soft-boiled eggs with toast soldiers turned a simple egg into an interactive meal that brought small pleasure to solitary dining. Seniors who grew up with this British-influenced tradition continued preparing it well into later years, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. The egg was lowered gently into boiling water and cooked for exactly 3 to 4 minutes, producing set white and gloriously runny yolk. Meanwhile, toast was prepared and cut into narrow strips called soldiers, ready for dipping. The egg sat in a small cup, its top carefully removed to reveal golden liquid within. Each toast soldier was dipped into the yolk, emerging coated in rich goodness that made plain bread taste extraordinary. The meal cost almost nothing yet felt ceremonial, requiring attention that gave structure to evenings that might otherwise blur together. For seniors eating alone, the process of dipping and eating provided small entertainment alongside nourishment. Spanish rice with ground beef was a one-skillet wonder that brought bold, tomatoey flavor to tables across America during the mid-20th century. A quarter-pound of ground beef was browned with diced onion and green pepper until fragrant, then rice was added directly to the skillet and toasted until it turned slightly golden. Canned tomatoes, water, and a generous shake of chili powder transformed the mixture into something vibrant and satisfying. The rice absorbed the spiced tomato liquid as it cooked, each grain taking on a reddish hue and robust flavor. Some added a splash of Worcestershire sauce or a pinch of cumin for extra depth. The dish came together in under 30 minutes and required only a single pan, making cleanup simple for those living alone. One skillet of Spanish rice fed a senior for 2 or 3 meals, providing protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables in every serving. The bold flavors made it feel special despite costing mere pennies to prepare, proving that budget cooking could still deliver excitement. Seafood. Newburg was the luxurious first course that opened Christmas dinner with creamy richness and delicate shellfish. Lobster, shrimp, and sometimes crab meat were gently folded into a sauce of butter, cream, egg yolks, and sherry, the mixture served over toast points or in patty shells. The sauce was velvety and rich, coating each piece of seafood in decadent luxury that justified its holiday placement. Making Newburg required careful technique. The egg yolks could curdle if the sauce got too hot, ruining everything. Families served this as a first course before the main roast, a statement of abundance and sophistication. The dish came from Delmonico's restaurant in New York, spreading to home kitchens where ambitious cooks recreated its elegance. Seafood Newburg represented the era's formal dining culture, when Christmas dinner was multiple courses served with ceremony. It has largely vanished, replaced by simpler appetizers that don't require last-minute sauce making. Beef and barley soup was a working woman's patience in a pot. It started early, with tough cuts of beef browned slow, onions and carrots sizzling until they softened, and barley sprinkled in to thicken everything with heartiness. The smell drifted through the house all afternoon, a sign that something was waiting at the end of the day. It was the kind of meal that didn't need tending, just trust. The kind that simmered quietly while laundry dried and homework got done. By dinner, the broth was deep and rich, the barley plump, the beef tender enough to fall apart with a spoon. It was nutrition dressed as nostalgia, proof that time could turn cheap cuts into something almost luxurious. Moms made it not for praise, but for peace, to warm everyone from the inside out. It was the kind of soup that could cure almost anything a long day brought. The pot itself seemed to hum with warmth, each bubble carrying the smell of comfort. Bread might have been stale, but dipped in that broth it tasted new again. Every bowl came with seconds, and every refill came with thanks. This was love slow-cooked, ladled gently, and served with pride, the quiet kind that asked for nothing back. Leather breeches with fatback brought summer's green beans to Christmas through ancient preservation. These weren't canned beans, but fresh beans strung on thread in late summer and hung from rafters. By Christmas, they hung brown, rattling when touched. The beans were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with fatback until tender. The result tasted like concentrated summer with smoky richness. In Appalachian homes, leather breeches represented connection between seasons, August abundance preserved for December. Grandmothers taught granddaughters proper stringing, threading beans carefully for drying. The beans hung all fall, visible reminders of summer work feeding Christmas tables. Cooked long, they became tender with chewy texture unlike fresh beans. The pot liquor was rich, sopped with cornbread. This represented mountain resourcefulness, preserving without equipment, feeding families through winter using thread and time. Mince pie was the grand finale of old-fashioned Thanksgivings. Filled with dried fruits, spices, and sometimes sweet or meat, it was rich, dark, and deeply aromatic. Its scent alone could fill a home with warmth and expectation. This pie told stories of early settlers who stretched what they had into something celebratory. The filling was simmered slowly, seasoned with nutmeg, cinnamon, and clove, flavors that tasted like history itself. Mince pie wasn't light or fleeting. It was meant to be savored, slice by slice. For generations, it sat proudly beside pumpkin and apple pies, holding its own as the taste of tradition. Today, it's nearly vanished from holiday tables, replaced by easier, milder desserts. But for those who remember, mince pie was more than food. It was the taste of gratitude, memory, and time well kept. Rabbit pie was one of the most common meals in rural America during the 1940s. Domestic meat was rationed, but rabbits were still hunted or raised for household consumption. The meat was lean, affordable, and abundant in the countryside. Housewives would stew the rabbit pieces with vegetables and then bake them under a thick pastry crust. The result was a savory pie that stretched small amounts of meat across many servings. It became especially popular in farming communities where game was more available than store-bought cuts. Children grew up seeing rabbit pie as normal, even if city families found it unusual. The dish was deeply tied to survival, but it also carried tradition and familiarity. Many families passed recipes down through generations, though over time it disappeared from mainstream dining. Forgotten now, rabbit pie was once a symbol of resilience, a dinner that carried families through shortages while still tasting surprisingly delicious at the end of the day. Kale and apple skillet supper delivered a surprising mix of sweet and savory flavors that brightened the monotony of wartime dinners. Garden kale, tough and resilient, thrived even in poor soil and cold weather, making it a dependable crop for victory gardeners. Cooks sliced tart apples and onions thin, then tossed them with the kale in a cast-iron skillet, adding a splash of cider vinegar and a spoonful of saved drippings. The apples softened and released their juices while the kale wilted into tender ribbons, creating a dish that was at once hearty and refreshing. Families valued the balance of vitamins and natural sweetness, especially when rationed sugar was scarce. The aroma of warm apples and greens gave small kitchens an inviting scent that promised comfort after long days of work or worry. This one-pan supper required little fuel and almost no cleanup, another victory when every resource mattered. It was a quiet yet delicious example of how simple local ingredients could create unexpected joy on the home front. Sloppy Joe skillet brought a sweet tang to busy weeknights when there was barely time to sit, let alone cook. Ground beef hit the hot skillet first, sizzling as it browned while the cook stirred in chopped onions and a quick sauce of tomato paste, vinegar, brown sugar, and a shake of paprika. Within minutes, the mixture thickened into a rich, saucy filling that perfumed the kitchen with a scent both savory and slightly sweet. Soft sandwich rolls were split and warmed while the beef bubbled, ready to soak up every drop. The sloppy name came alive the moment the mixture met the bread, spilling deliciously over the sides and begging for napkins. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of meat across several sandwiches, and children delighted in the messy fun of every bite. Fast, filling, and friendly to any budget, the Sloppy Joe skillet earned its place as a dependable working man's dinner that felt like a small party at the table. Number 22. Mock apple pie from Ritz crackers. You broke up 36 Ritz crackers into a pie shell, poured a sugar syrup of water, sugar, lemon juice, and cream of tartar over the top, dusted it with cinnamon, and baked it for 30 minutes. What came out tasted enough like apple pie that grown men asked for seconds. Ritz hit shelves on November 21, 1934, at 19 cents a pound, and within 3 years they were the best-selling cracker in the world. Apples were expensive, crackers were cheap. The cream of tartar mimicked apple's tart bite, and the lemon did the rest. By the Second World War, Nabisco was printing the recipe on every blue cracker box. Your grandmother served it at church suppers. Nobody guessed, but you could only pull it off if you served it warm. Cold mock apple pie tasted like a soggy cracker, and that was the rule every Depression-era hostess passed down without writing it on the recipe card. Number 22. Swiss steak. A round steak pounded thin with the edge of a saucer, dredged in flour, browned in a heavy skillet, then braised for 2 hours with stewed tomatoes, green pepper, and onion until a fork could cut it. 49 cents a pound at the A&P in 1964. The technique was called Swissing because the meat got rolled between fluted rollers at the butcher counter to break the fibers. Every family had a Wednesday version. The gravy went over mashed potatoes or buttered noodles. By the time microwaves hit kitchens in the late 1970s, nobody had 2 hours for a weeknight braise anymore. And the dish that smelled like Wednesday across half of America began to fade. But you could still find it on the menu of small-town diners through 1991, listed under blue plate specials with mashed potatoes and green beans for $3.75. Potato soup asked nothing and gave back more than seemed fair. 2 potatoes, 1 onion, water to cover, salt, 20 minutes on the back burner. When the potatoes softened, you added milk, butter, a heavy grind of black pepper. The move no cookbook explained well. Mash a few pieces against the side of the pot while leaving the rest in chunks, so the broth thickened without going smooth, and every spoonful had something to bite. It cost under 20 cents in the early 1960s. It was the soup of people living alone after something: a divorce, a death, a child who left and took all the noise. You made it because it filled the kitchen with a plain, honest smell and fed you without requiring thought. She made it every winter. You knew that version by heart, the way she never once measured the milk. The version you make now is close. Every time you sit down alone with it, close is not the same thing. Cheesy chicken and hash brown casserole arrived when the freezer section became a pantry. Frozen, shredded hash browns, the bag in the bottom of the freezer since the last big breakfast, were the entire starch, tumbled into a dish still partly frozen, then covered with shredded rotisserie chicken, sour cream, cream of chicken soup, shredded cheddar, and salt. No pre-cooking, no thawing, no browning. $3.50 for an hour. The hash browns cooked in steam from the sour cream and soup. The chicken absorbed the potato fat, and the cheddar went crispy at the edges. Through the 1970s, as frozen foods became standard pantry items, this assembly cooking replaced the labor of peeling and slicing that earlier potato casseroles required. She probably learned it from a church cookbook or the back of the Ore-Ida bag, and once she did, she never went back to fresh potatoes. That version, the easy one done in 10 minutes flat, is the one you remember, and she is not here to make it anymore. Dumplings and wild greens was the spring celebration meal when foraged foods meant fresh nutrition after months of preserved vegetables. Grandma would gather whatever was ready: dandelion greens, lamb's quarters, wild mustard, washing them thoroughly in multiple water changes. The greens simmered with salt pork until tender, their pot liquor becoming rich and slightly bitter. Meanwhile, she mixed dumpling dough by feel: flour, a bit of lard, enough liquid to hold together, then dropped spoonfuls directly into the bubbling greens. The dumplings puffed and cooked through, absorbing the flavors of greens and pork. This dish required knowing which wild plants were edible, when they were tender enough to eat, and how to cook dumplings that were light rather than leaden. No measurements existed because the greens varied every gathering, and Grandma's hands knew what her eyes confirmed. It tasted like the earth waking up, like survival, like spring itself served in a bowl. The tomato had to be warm from the garden, not the refrigerator, never the store, and sliced thick enough that the juice ran down your wrist when you bit into the sandwich. 2 slices of soft white bread, a heavy spread of mayonnaise, thick rounds of a tomato still holding the heat of the afternoon sun, and enough salt to make the flavor crack open. This was lunch and sometimes supper across the entire American South, a meal so simple that writing it down felt insulting to the people who made it. Hellmann's, first mass-distributed in the 1920s, became the only acceptable brand. Using anything else was grounds for a kitchen argument that could last a whole summer. The sandwich existed only during tomato season. When the last vine died in September, it vanished, and no winter tomato from a grocery store could bring it back. Welsh Rarebit in its quick version brought pub-style comfort to kitchen tables, requiring only cheese, milk, and toast to create something surprisingly sophisticated. Seniors who remembered this dish from earlier decades simplified the traditional recipe into something achievable in under 10 minutes. Sharp cheddar was grated and melted slowly in a small saucepan with a splash of milk, dash of Worcestershire sauce, and sometimes pinch of dry mustard. The mixture was stirred until smooth, then spooned generously over toast placed on a plate. The cheese sauce pooled around bread, creating a dish part soup and part sandwich, eaten with knife and fork. The flavors were bold and savory, the texture rich and comforting. For seniors eating alone, Welsh Rarebit felt like treating yourself to something special without leaving home or spending much money. This dish transformed ordinary pantry ingredients into something that tasted like care and intention. Corned beef hash from a can became an unlikely hero for seniors who needed hot, filling meals without the fuss of extensive preparation. The rectangular cans lined grocery store shelves at budget-friendly prices, containing a mixture of corned beef and potatoes that transformed when properly cooked. The secret was patience, spreading the hash in a hot, greased skillet and leaving it alone until a dark, crispy crust formed on the bottom. That crust was the prize, shattering against the teeth before giving way to the soft, savory interior. A fried egg placed on top turned it into a complete meal, the runny yolk creating an instant sauce that coated every bite. Seniors living alone appreciated that a single can provided 2 generous servings, each one satisfying enough to carry them through to the next meal. The dish required only a skillet and a few minutes of attention, making it perfect for those days when cooking felt like too much effort. Corned beef hash proved that convenience and comfort could coexist beautifully. Standing rib roast was the king of Christmas meats, its impressive size and rich marbling commanding respect from the moment it emerged from the oven. Butchers prepared these roasts with the bones still attached, creating a natural rack that elevated the meat for even cooking. The exterior was rubbed with garlic, salt, pepper, and fresh herbs, then roasted at high heat to create a deeply browned crust before the temperature dropped for slow cooking. Slicing revealed a gradient from well-done edges to rosy pink centers, allowing guests to choose their preferred doneness. The bones were fought over, gnawed clean at the table, or saved for soup. Yorkshire pudding was the traditional accompaniment, the batter puffing dramatically in the hot beef drippings. This was investment cooking, the roast costing more than a week's grocery budget, but justified by the holiday's importance. Standing rib roast represented prosperity and tradition, connecting American families to English Christmas customs. Turkey and rice skillet was a weeknight lifesaver, the kind of dinner that could appear from almost nothing. It began with bits of leftover turkey, chopped fine and browned in a single pan with a handful of frozen vegetables, peas, carrots, corn, whatever was on hand. A scoop of rice went in next, soaking up every bit of flavor as it simmered with a little broth. The scent was soft and homey, the kind that filled the kitchen with quiet reassurance. Nothing about it was fancy, but everything about it worked. Moms leaned on it when time was short and energy was low, knowing it could feed a family for pennies. The rice puffed up tender, the vegetables brightened with salt and butter, and the turkey gave just enough richness to make it feel complete. It was balance in a skillet, light but satisfying, simple but full of heart. Some added soy sauce or onion powder to stretch its flavor. Others kept it plain, letting the rice and turkey speak for themselves. It tasted like peace after a long day, proof that even the most ordinary ingredients could make something wonderful when stirred with love. Whole hog shoulder with crackling bread was Christmas feast requiring community effort, turning December butchering into celebration. Mountain families raised hogs specifically for Christmas slaughter, feeding them all year. The shoulder was large enough to feed extended family, fatty enough to stay moist during long cooking. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, then slow roasted over hickory coals in outdoor pits men tended throughout Christmas Eve night. Fat rendered slowly, creating crispy bark outside while inside stayed tender. Women saved cracklings, crispy rendered pork fat bits, to mix into cornbread batter. The crackling bread baked in cast iron skillets, top golden and crunchy. In rural Georgia, Arkansas, and Mississippi, this meant Christmas smelling like wood smoke for miles. Families gathered around outdoor fires, sharing whiskey and stories while meat cooked through cold night. The finished shoulder pulled apart easily, juice running into crackling bread. Tomato aspic was Thanksgiving's strangest star, a savory gelatin molded with tomato juice, onions, and celery. Served chilled and sliced, it was both salad and side, a holdover from when gelatin meant sophistication. Its tangy flavor paired surprisingly well with turkey and dressing, offering brightness amid the richness. Guests either loved it or politely pushed it aside, but it always sparked conversation. In the 1950s, it symbolized elegance, something daring for the dinner table. Housewives followed recipes clipped from magazines, proud of its quivering perfection. Today, it's more curiosity than cuisine, but once it was a badge of culinary ambition. Tomato aspic was a dish of confidence, bold, unusual, and unapologetically of its time. Veal loaf with tomato sauce was a budget-friendly cousin of meatloaf that became popular in the 1940s. Veal was often cheaper than beef, and grinding it made it possible to stretch the protein even further. Housewives mixed veal with breadcrumbs, onions, and spices, shaping it into loaves that baked evenly in the oven. To add flavor and moisture, a simple tomato sauce made from canned tomatoes was poured on top. The result was tender, savory, and filling, able to feed large families without straining the budget. It was also versatile, serving well hot at dinner or cold as sandwiches the next day. During years of rationing, that kind of efficiency mattered. Veal loaf was not the showpiece of any feast, but it did its job well, keeping families full on a small amount of meat. Today it has faded from memory, but for many, it was once a weekly dinner worth remembering. Turnip top greens and grits gave wartime families a way to savor every part of a plant while turning a southern staple into a sustaining evening meal. Farmers and gardeners gathered the leafy tops of turnips, washed them carefully, and sautéed them with onions and a small cube of bacon fat saved from previous meals. The greens softened into a deep, savory tangle that tasted rich despite the modest ingredients. These were spooned generously over steaming stone-ground grits, a grain that was plentiful in the South and not heavily rationed. The combination delivered vitamins, minerals, and enough hearty texture to feed a hungry family after a long day of fieldwork or factory shifts. Neighbors often traded turnip tops for cornmeal, ensuring that nothing from the garden went to waste. Children would mix everything together, turning the bowl into a creamy green swirl that was as comforting as it was filling. This dish was a celebration of thrift and community spirit, proving that frugality could produce a meal every bit as satisfying as those served before the war. Steak tips with garlic butter turned small pieces of beef into a dinner that tasted far more luxurious than the clock allowed. Bite-sized cubes of steak were seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in a smoking hot skillet until browned on the outside and just tender within. As the meat rested for a moment, butter melted in the pan with minced garlic and a handful of fresh parsley, creating a sauce that smelled like a steakhouse. The sizzling butter was poured back over the meat, coating every piece in rich, garlicky flavor. Served over toast, rice, or even plain with a side of vegetables, the dish offered restaurant-style indulgence in the time it took to set the table. Families loved how a modest amount of beef could feel like a feast, and the sound of butter hitting the hot pan became a signal that the day's work was over and something delicious was ready. Number 20. Tuna noodle casserole. You opened a can of chicken of the sea, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, boiled egg noodles, mixed it with a cup of milk, topped it with crushed potato chips, and broiled it 10 minutes. The first printed recipe came out of Sunset magazine in 1930 from a Kennewick, Washington woman named only as Mrs. WFS. Campbell's introduced cream of mushroom soup in 1934, and that one product is the reason your grandmother made this every Thursday for 31 years. By 1959, 8 out of 10 households served canned tuna weekly, with this casserole in the top 3 uses. It fed a working family of 5 for less than $1. It still does. Your aunt is still making it. The genius detail was the potato chip crust on top, which turned to glass under the broiler and shattered when you ran the spoon through the dish. The crunch is what your cousins remembered, not the tuna, the chips. Number 16. Pork chops and applesauce with shake and bake. 4 bone-in chops shaken in a paper bag of seasoned breadcrumbs and baked at 425 until the coating turned crisp. A jar of Mott's applesauce on the side, lukewarm, straight from the refrigerator. Shake and Bake hit shelves in 1965, and within 4 years, it was in roughly 1 in 3 American kitchens. The Brady Bunch made the line famous when Peter Brady said pork chops and applesauce in his Humphrey Bogart voice. The dish was Tuesday and Thursday food. It was simple. It was effective. By the 1990s, the box had moved to the bottom shelf. The chops thinned out. The applesauce got organic. Nobody under 40 knows the rhythm of shaking a bag, the small percussive sound it made. Tamale pie was what you made when ground beef and a can of beans needed to become something that actually felt like dinner. Brown the beef with onion and garlic, add kidney beans, canned tomatoes, chili powder, and cumin, let it thicken. Pour a cornbread batter over the top, cornmeal, flour, egg, milk, bake at 400 degrees for 25 minutes. The recipe had circulated in American cookbooks since the 1930s, when Midwestern agricultural extension pamphlets recommended it as a practical way to stretch inexpensive ground beef. By the 1960s, it appeared in budget cookbooks nationwide, often noted as makes 2 meals. The genius was the crust. It absorbed the chili juices from below while baking, so the bottom was dark and moist and spiced while the top stayed dry and crisp. 2 completely different textures in the same dish. You had to decide which half you wanted first. Both choices were right, and you never quite made up your mind before the dish was empty. The secret was the raw beef. Recipes that had you brown the ground beef first missed the point. The logic depended on the fat rendering directly into the macaroni and tomato sauce as everything cooked together, binding the pasta in the drippings. Dry, uncooked elbow macaroni first, then raw ground beef crumbled over it, then canned diced tomatoes, then beef broth, just enough to submerge the pasta, then shredded cheddar across the surface. Tight foil, 350, 45 minutes, then uncovered for 10 more to set the cheese. Campbell's published an emergency dinner pamphlet in the 1950s built on this exact principle. Raw starch and raw protein combined with liquid in a sealed dish, which became the organizing idea of American post-war convenience cooking. The broth turns the macaroni translucent where it is not yet absorbed. The beef fat marbles through the pasta, and the cheddar goes slightly crisp at the edges. You pull back the foil and the kitchen smells like a diner in 1957. Wilted lettuce with hot bacon dressing transformed garden greens into something entirely different from cold salad. Grandma would fry thick-cut bacon until crispy, then remove it and pour a splash of cider vinegar into the sizzling hot grease. The mixture would pop and sputter dangerously, filling the kitchen with sharp, smoky fragrance. She added a pinch of sugar by feel, stirred quickly, then poured the hot dressing over a bowl of tender leaf lettuce just picked from the garden. The leaves wilted immediately, becoming silky and infused with bacon flavor while still retaining some fresh crunch. The crumbled bacon was scattered on top, sometimes with sliced hard-boiled eggs. This dish existed only in spring when lettuce was young and tender, before summer heat turned it bitter. Grandma made it entirely by instinct. How much vinegar depended on how tart she wanted it, how much sugar on the lettuce's bitterness that day. The salad was eaten immediately, while still warm, a fleeting pleasure that couldn't be saved. When the nearest ocean was 500 miles away and fresh fish meant a creek full of catfish you didn't have time to catch, canned salmon was the answer. Salmon patties, canned salmon mixed with egg, cracker crumbs, and chopped onion, shaped into rounds and fried in a skillet, showed up on Friday supper tables across Appalachia and the rural South every week for decades. During the 1930s and 40s, a can of pink salmon cost less than 15 cents and provided enough protein to stretch across 2 meals for a family of 4. Coal mining families in West Virginia and eastern Kentucky relied on them because the company store stocked canned goods but rarely fresh meat. The patties fried best in a well-seasoned cast-iron skillet with enough grease to come halfway up the sides, and you pressed them thin so the edges went crisp while the center stayed moist. The smell of canned salmon frying on a Friday evening was so specific to these kitchens that catching a trace of it decades later could stop you cold in a grocery aisle. Creamed eggs on toast transformed breakfast ingredients into satisfying supper that cost almost nothing and came together in under 10 minutes. Seniors who survived the Depression understood that eggs were among the most affordable proteins, stretching further when combined with simple white sauce. The preparation began with melting butter in a saucepan, whisking in flour until smooth, then slowly adding milk while stirring until thickened. Hard-boiled eggs, already prepared and waiting in the refrigerator, were chopped and folded into this creamy base with salt and pepper. The mixture was spooned over buttered toast while still warm. The result was rich, filling, and deceptively elegant for something made from such humble ingredients. This dish fed widows and widowers across America during decades when eating alone meant cooking economically but eating well. The eggs provided protein while the toast gave substance, and the sauce made everything feel like someone had taken care. Bean and bacon simmer was the kind of slow-cooked meal that filled small homes with warmth and the promise of something good waiting on the stove. Dried beans cost pennies per pound and provided protein that rivaled meat at a fraction of the price. Seniors would sort through the beans each morning, cover them with water, and let them soak while going about their day. By evening, the beans were ready to simmer with a few strips of bacon, diced onion, and enough water to cover everything by an inch. Hours of gentle cooking transformed the hard beans into creamy, tender morsels while the bacon infused the liquid with smoky richness. A single pound of dried beans created enough food to last nearly a week when portioned carefully. The cooking liquid itself became a treasure, thick with flavor and nutrients that could be sipped like broth or used to moisten cornbread. This wasn't a meal that happened quickly, but for seniors with time and little money, bean and bacon simmer provided security in every spoonful. Beef Wellington was the ultimate expression of holiday extravagance, wrapping prime beef tenderloin in mushroom duxelles and flaky puff pastry. The preparation took hours, searing the beef, cooking down finely chopped mushrooms until they were practically dry, wrapping everything in pastry and chilling until firm. Timing the bake was crucial. The pastry needed to turn golden while the beef inside stayed perfectly pink. Slicing revealed beautiful cross-sections of meat encased in mushroom and pastry that made guests audibly gasp. This was company food, reserved for Christmas Eve dinners when important guests were coming or when families wanted to prove their sophistication. The dish required expensive ingredients and considerable skill, making it a status symbol as much as a meal. Beef Wellington represented the aspirational cooking of the era, when home cooks attempted restaurant-quality dishes to impress. It has largely vanished from home kitchens, relegated to expensive steakhouses where few experience its former glory. Sausage and cabbage skillet was the one-pan wonder that turned thrift into art. A single link of sausage, sliced thin, met a pile of cabbage that wilted down into tenderness, flavored by onions and a touch of pepper. The smell was sharp, smoky, and comforting all at once. It cooked fast but tasted slow, the kind of dish that tasted better than it had any right to. Moms liked it because it stretched what little meat they had into a meal that could fill everyone's plate. The cabbage soaked up all the flavor, and the sausage gave it heart. It was the definition of economy. No waste, no rush, just a skillet and a bit of love. Steam filled the kitchen windows, and the air felt alive. This dish proved that patience and seasoning could make miracles from scraps. Every bite carried pride, and every pan told a story of strength. Salt-cured country ham was Christmas luxury taking months to create and symbolizing prosperity through patience. These weren't store hams, but whole hog legs cured in salt, then hung in smokehouses through fall and winter. The curing began in November, with fresh hams rubbed with salt and sometimes sugar, drawing out moisture and preserving meat without refrigeration. By Christmas, hams developed deep mahogany exteriors and concentrated salty sweet flavor, unlike anything modern. The ham was soaked overnight to remove excess salt, then baked slowly with brown sugar glaze, creating caramelized crust. Sliced thin, the meat was intensely flavorful, salty, smoky, rich, requiring only biscuits and red-eye gravy. In Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, country ham represented wealth and foresight, since families began curing in fall for Christmas. The smell of ham baking filled houses Christmas morning. This wasn't bought but made food, requiring knowledge of salt ratios and smoking. Sweet potato soufflé was the dish that blurred the line between side and dessert. Mashed sweet potatoes were whipped until airy, blended with butter, eggs, and sugar, then topped with pecans or a crumble of brown sugar. It baked into a golden, fragrant cloud that smelled like comfort itself. This was Southern elegance, a holiday staple that felt indulgent yet familiar. At church potlucks and family dinners, it brought smiles before the first bite. The sweetness paired beautifully with the saltiness of the turkey, making it unforgettable. In many homes, it replaced pie altogether, the star of both dinner and dessert. Over the years, it's been overshadowed by marshmallow-topped versions, but the original soufflé remains unmatched. Sweet potato soufflé was more than food. It was love-baked light, the taste of home dressed up for celebration. Rutabaga stew was another dish that shows just how much wartime families depended on root vegetables. Meat was often scarce or doled out in tiny rations, but rutabagas were hardy and easy to grow. They could be simmered with onions, carrots, and sometimes a small bit of pork fat or ham bone for flavor. The result was a simple but filling stew that could carry an entire dinner. Its sweetness balanced well with savory broth, and it became a common sight at rural tables. Many people who had never eaten rutabagas before the war found themselves relying on them week after week. They were cheap, nutritious, and available when little else was. The stew may not have felt like a feast, but it kept families warm and satisfied through long winters. Today, it has all but disappeared from kitchens, but in its day, it was a lifesaver, one of those humble meals that fed countless households. cranberry bean bake combined two ingredients that seemed almost destined to meet in wartime kitchens: hearty beans for protein and tart cranberries for brightness. Home cooks soaked white beans overnight, then layered them in a baking dish with handfuls of fresh or dried cranberries and a drizzle of molasses for sweetness. The slow oven heat coaxed the flavors together until the beans were tender and the berries burst into a ruby glaze. This dish had special meaning for families in New England, where cranberries grew in bogs that did not require expensive fertilizers or imported seeds. Beans, meanwhile, were ration-friendly and could be stored dry for months, making them a reliable staple when meat was scarce. Children would help stir the pot and sneak a taste of the tangy syrup as it thickened. Some cooks added a sprinkle of nutmeg or a dash of cider vinegar to sharpen the flavor, creating small regional twists. Served hot from the oven, the cranberry bean bake brought color and cheer to dinner tables that often saw only shades of brown and gray during the long war years. Egg and potato. Hash turned scraps into a filling supper that could be on the table before the day's stories were finished. Leftover boiled potatoes were diced and tossed into a hot skillet with a bit of butter until their edges crisped to a golden brown. Eggs were cracked directly over the sizzling potatoes, their yolks breaking to coat each bite in a rich sauce as they cooked. A sprinkle of salt, pepper, and maybe a dash of paprika was all it needed. The aroma of frying potatoes and eggs promised satisfaction and thrift, a meal built from yesterday's extras and today's needs. Served straight from the pan, the hash invited everyone to eat family style, forks clinking as the steam rose. It proved that speed never had to sacrifice comfort and that the best dinners often came from making the most of what was already on hand. Number 25. Hoover Stew. You learned this one in a soup line in 1932 because they were the only kitchens still cooking. A pot of macaroni, a can of stewed tomatoes, a can of corn, and whatever hot dogs the butcher could not sell that week. They named it after the president who took the blame, and Hooverville families ate it 3 nights a week for a decade. And the trick was the order. You cooked the macaroni first, drained most of the liquid, then dropped the tomatoes and corn into the same pot so the pasta starch thickened the broth without flour. 1 pot, 1 burner, 20 minutes total. The whole pan cost 20 cents in 1933 and fed 5. But a single mother in a Hooverville tent could put a hot supper on a folding table with 2 cans, 1 box of macaroni, and a stove that ran on scrap wood. Your grandmother called it supper. She was not ashamed. Number 25. Tomato aspic salad. A ring of tomato juice, gelatin, and finely chopped celery, unmolded onto an iceberg leaf with a dollop of Hellmann's mayonnaise dropped in the center. Hostesses called it a salad because it was cold and it jiggled. It first appeared on suburban dinner tables in the late 1950s and held its place through the early 1960s as the marker that a housewife could afford a refrigerator and the time it took to chill 3 layers. Imagine a copper ring mold sweating in a Frigidaire next to a glass dish of deviled eggs. The Jell-O brand even sold a seasoned tomato flavor in the 1960s, packaged for exactly this dish at 23 cents a box. By 1968, better homes started running fewer molded salads and more crisp greens, and the aspic ring slid quietly out of the dinner party rotation. Today, nobody under 60 has tasted one. The dish belongs to the era when sophistication was measured by how cleanly something slid out of a copper mold. Franks and beans was the dinner you made when the clock said 6:30, the wallet said empty, and the skillet was already on the burner before your coat was off. You opened a can of Van Camp's pork and beans, always Van Camp's, the sauce thicker than any store brand, sliced your Oscar Mayer wieners on the diagonal, added brown sugar and a squeeze of yellow mustard, and in 10 minutes had something smelling like a cookout for 30 cents. The trick was heat. Too high and the beans scorched to the bottom. Low and slow, lid half on, until the sauce thickened and the hot dog swelled and split at the edges. You ate it from the pan sometimes, crackers instead of a fork. Nobody was watching. That's the part nobody tells you about cooking alone. The freedom of it, the lack of theater. By the 1970s, frozen dinners brought the competition, and Franks and beans quietly left the table. The skillet that made it went to an estate sale with everything else. The smell hit the hallway before you reached the kitchen. Kielbasa and sauerkraut in a hot oven produce a sharp, smoky smell that is not polite and not quiet. Central European immigrant families brought kielbasa into American working-class neighborhoods in the early 20th century. Polish, Slovak, Czech households in mill towns from Pennsylvania to Ohio, and the combination of smoked sausage with fermented cabbage and potato was centuries old before it ever crossed an ocean. The method is simple. Kielbasa coins, drained sauerkraut, chunked potatoes, brown sugar, mustard, oil, all tossed and spread across one pan. 400 degrees, 30 minutes. The brown sugar tames the fermented bite, the potato soaks up sausage fat, and the whole thing goes from pungent and sharp to sweet and tender. Precisely why this dish outlasted the neighborhoods that invented it. The mill towns emptied. The kielbasa stayed. Leather breeches and fatback was a winter survival dish that turned summer's green bean abundance into cold weather sustenance. Grandma would string fresh green beans on heavy thread during peak harvest, creating long garlands that hung from kitchen rafters to dry for weeks. By winter, these shriveled brown strips rattled like old leather when touched, giving them their peculiar name. To prepare them, she soaked handfuls overnight, then simmered them for hours with salted fatback that slowly melted its richness into the pot. The beans softened into something entirely different from fresh ones, chewy, concentrated, with a deep, earthy flavor that no canned vegetable could match. This dish required no measuring, just the knowledge of how much water to add and when the beans had reached the right tenderness. Families relied on leather breeches when snow-covered gardens, and fresh vegetables existed only in memory. It was peasant food that tasted like providence, requiring only patience and the accumulated wisdom of generations. But before anything could be stretched or seasoned, someone had to know what was safe to eat from the ground, and poke salad was the test that separated mountain cooks from everyone else. Phytolacca americana, pokeweed, grew wild along fence rows and ditch banks across the Appalachian South, and in early spring the young shoots were one of the first greens available to families who had eaten nothing fresh since autumn. The plant was toxic if handled wrong. You boiled the leaves 3 separate times, draining and replacing the water each round to pull the poison out before the greens were safe to eat. After the 3rd boil, you fried them in bacon grease with salt, and they turned dark, tender, and rich, tasting like a cross between spinach and asparagus. Cherokee and rural Appalachian families had been preparing poke this way for generations, and the knowledge passed by standing at the stove, not from any book. One wrong step, skipping a boil, picking leaves too mature, and the dish could make you sick. You either knew how or you didn't touch it. Bread and milk bowl was perhaps the oldest and simplest supper in the American pantry, dating back centuries and persisting through every economic hardship. Seniors who remembered harder times often returned to this dish when cooking seemed too effortful and appetites had shrunk with age. The preparation required nothing more than tearing bread into pieces, placing them in a bowl, and pouring cold or warm milk over the top. Sugar was sprinkled according to taste, transforming the humble combination into something approaching dessert. Some preferred their bread and milk warm, heating the milk gently before pouring. Others liked it cold, especially during summer months. The bread softened quickly, becoming easy to eat with a spoon, gentle on sensitive stomachs and aging teeth. This was food stripped to its essence. For seniors eating alone, bread and milk represented self-sufficiency and comfort of familiar flavors, asking nothing and giving everything a tired body needed. Hamburger hash was the weeknight miracle that turned a quarter pound of ground beef into a complete dinner for pennies. During the lean decades of the mid-20th century, seniors living alone discovered that browning ground beef with diced potatoes and onions created something far greater than the sum of its parts. The meat released its fat into the skillet, crisping the potatoes while the onions caramelized into sweet strands that wove through every bite. A splash of Worcestershire sauce and black pepper transformed the humble mixture into something deeply savory. The beauty of hamburger hash was its forgiving nature. It accepted leftover peas, corn, or green beans without complaint, stretching the meal further. One skillet fed one person for 2 meals, making it economical for those watching every dime. The crispy bottom that formed against the cast iron became the most coveted part, scraped up and savored last. This wasn't fancy cooking, but it was honest food that kept countless seniors fed and satisfied. Oyster stew was the Christmas Eve tradition that brought coastal flavors to holiday tables across America, even in landlocked states. Fresh oysters were gently poached in their own liquor with butter, cream, and just enough seasoning to enhance their briny sweetness. The stew was served in warmed bowls with oyster crackers floating on top, each spoonful delivering plump oysters in rich, silky broth. Families maintained this tradition from generations past, when oysters were abundant and affordable enough for working-class celebrations. The dish required restraint. Overcooking turned oysters rubbery. Too much seasoning masked their delicate flavor. Some families added celery or a touch of sherry, but purists insisted on simplicity. By the 1980s, oyster prices had risen and the tradition faded. Those who grew up with oyster stew Christmas Eves remember the ritual of shucking, the anticipation, and the briny warmth that meant the holiday had truly begun. Beef and tater tot bake was what happened when practicality met pride. It started with ground beef browned in a skillet mixed with canned vegetables, cream soup, and a pinch of seasoning that every mother knew by heart. Then came the tater tots, lined neatly across the top like soldiers waiting for duty, ready to turn crisp and golden in the oven. The smell that followed was the smell of relief, warm, savory, and steady. The bubbling soup beneath made a soft stew while the tots stayed crunchy, giving each bite a bit of both comfort and contrast. It was a weeknight win that felt like victory, a way to make something hearty without much time or money. When the casserole dish hit the table, conversation started again. The sound of forks clinking was a soundtrack to everyday life, simple, predictable, and full. It proved that love did not need fancy ingredients. It just needed to show up hot. Crackling cornbread with cane syrup was Christmas side that elevated simple cornbread into something rich and celebratory. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat left from lard making, were mixed into cornbread batter before baking, creating pockets of crunchy, porky richness throughout. The bread baked in cast iron until crusty outside and tender inside, its top golden and inviting. Served with dark cane syrup drizzled over warm slices, this combined savory and sweet in ways that defined mountain eating. In rural communities, crackling cornbread meant using every part of the hog, transforming scraps into celebration. The cracklings added protein and flavor that plain cornbread lacked, while cane syrup provided sweetness families couldn't always afford. This was Christmas abundance created from what others might discard, proving mountain cooks knew how to make luxury from nothing. Cranberry mold salad was the showstopper of the 1950s Thanksgiving table. Shimmering and jewel-toned, it was made from gelatin mixed with cranberry sauce, crushed pineapple, chopped nuts, and sometimes even celery for crunch. It wasn't just food, it was centerpiece art. Served in ring molds or glass bowls, it glistened under dining room lights like a ruby. Every bite was tart, sweet, and nostalgic, a perfect balance between dessert and salad. For housewives of the mid-century, it represented hospitality and creativity. Making it was a ritual, pouring, chilling, and unmolding with care. Over time, as homemade dishes gave way to simpler canned options, this wobbly wonder faded from holiday spreads. But in memory, it still sparkles, a reminder of an era when even salad dressed for the occasion. Cranberry mold salad was joy in solid form, a dish that truly shined at Thanksgiving. Boston brown bread with beans was an old New England tradition that resurfaced in force during the 1940s. Steamed bread made from rye, cornmeal, and molasses paired perfectly with baked beans, creating a full supper from cheap staples. It was hearty, sweet, and filling, exactly what families needed when meat was out of reach. Housewives could prepare both in one pot, letting the beans simmer while the bread steamed in coffee tins. The pairing offered protein, carbohydrates, and a touch of comfort all in one. It was also easy to scale for large families or community gatherings, making it a reliable choice for lean times. Brown bread and beans were not glamorous, but they were dependable, and that counted for more than appearance. As rationing pushed Americans to re-embrace older traditions, this dish gained a new reputation for thrift and taste. Today, it has faded into obscurity, but it was once a weekly staple. Hominy and celery casserole represented the quiet ingenuity of Midwestern home cooks who stretched regional crops into hearty suppers. Hominy, made from dried corn kernels soaked until swollen and soft, provided bulk and a mild sweetness that paired beautifully with the gentle crunch of celery. Housewives stirred the hominy into a simple white sauce made from evaporated milk and a touch of flour, seasoned it with black pepper, and folded in finely chopped celery before baking it under a light layer of breadcrumbs. The dish emerged bubbling and fragrant, ready to be scooped onto plates alongside whatever garden vegetables were in season. Its appeal lay in how accessible the ingredients were, since corn was grown in abundance and celery was easy to keep crisp in an icebox. The casserole kept well for leftovers and reheated nicely, a valuable trait in an era when nothing was wasted. Families across small towns enjoyed this comforting meal while listening to radio reports of the war, finding steadiness in a recipe that never failed to satisfy or fill a hungry household. Fried bologna, sandwich with mustard, brought quick satisfaction to tired working families who needed a hot dinner without fuss. Thick slices of bologna were scored so they curled as they hit a sizzling cast iron skillet, filling the kitchen with a smoky aroma that signaled something good was minutes away. While the bologna browned, slices of white bread were lightly toasted and brushed with butter for extra flavor. A generous swipe of yellow mustard added tang, and some cooks layered in thin slices of onion or a single leaf of crisp lettuce if they had it. The heat from the skillet gave the meat a crisp edge and a savory depth that transformed a humble cold cut into a hearty main course. Children loved the salty, slightly sweet taste and the way the sandwich stayed warm as they carried it to the table. Parents loved that dinner was ready before the evening news began. It was fast, filling, and cheap. Everything a working household needed at the end of a long day. Even today, one bite of that hot sandwich can summon memories of late nights, hard work, and the comfort of a meal that respected both time and appetite. Number 19, American chop suey. You browned a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion, added a can of tomato sauce and a can of stewed tomatoes, stirred in 2 cups of cooked elbow macaroni, and called it dinner. New England called it chop suey. Michigan called it goulash. In Pittsburgh, your father called it Tuesday. The earliest printed recipe goes back to 1909. The version your grandmother knew came from a 1958 cookbook that added bacon and green peppers and stretched the pan to 6 people. But that is the working definition of genius: cheap, filling, shameless. And the real engineering inside the bowl was the elbow macaroni itself, because the curl of the noodle held a tablespoon of tomato sauce on its own, which meant a single spoonful delivered 3 things at once: the meat, the starch, and the sauce. Number 24, creamed chipped beef on toast. Thin slices of dried, salted beef pulled from a small armor glass jar, stirred into a roux of butter, flour, and whole milk, then poured over toasted Wonder Bread. The Army called it SOS. The Navy made it with tomato. Civilian families inherited it from fathers who had eaten it on ships and at Fort Bragg. It became a Sunday night supper because it cost almost nothing and could be on the table in 12 minutes. Picture a husband home from second shift, eating it standing at the counter while the kids did homework. By the late 1960s, the armor jar was migrating to the back of the grocery shelf. The veterans who learned to love it began passing, and their grandchildren had no taste for the salt or the memory. The dish refused to disappear in military families, where you could still find it on a Sunday plate as late as 1978, and the recipe still works the way it used to, but the audience for it does not. The smell of salmon patties hit you before you were fully inside, warm and oceanic, meaning someone was making something out of nothing. canned pink salmon, bones left in because they were soft enough to eat, and every mother insisted they were good for you, got flaked with crumbled saltines, 1 egg, a spoonful of yellow mustard, and dried onion flakes. Shaped with wet hands into a skillet where Crisco was already shimmering. 2 minutes aside, 3 if you wanted the crust darker. The outside turned copper penny brown. The inside stayed barely warm at center. Tartar sauce if you had it, ketchup if you didn't. A whole generation kept a can of salmon in the back of the cabinet the way they kept a $20 bill in a shoe. Not for every day, but for when everything ran out. Canned salmon cost under 40 cents in the early 1960s. The patties made from it tasted like a cook who knew what to do with 40 cents. Most of those cooks are gone now, and the cans in the back of the cabinet have been gathering dust. Uncooked long-grain rice goes in first, dry, straight from the bag, no pre-rinsing. That was the rule. And if you had to ask why, you were not there yet. Bone-in pork chops lay on top, seasoned with salt, onion powder, and paprika, and a can of cream of mushroom soup thinned with 1 can of water went over all of it. Foil tight, 350, 1 hour covered and 15 uncovered to brown the top. The rice absorbed every drop of pork fat and broth, pulling flavor up through the grain the way only sealed, slow heat allows, and the chops came out falling toward the bone. Nobody called this a recipe. It was just the Tuesday answer when the budget was low. Through the 1950s and 60s, home economists promoted pork and rice casseroles as the most cost-efficient complete protein a household could produce. Meat, starch, and fat in one sealed dish, no moisture wasted. Today, the chops come out of an air fryer and the rice is instant, and the patience of that sealed hour is gone. Soup, beans, and cornbread was the Monday dinner that anchored countless rural weeks across Appalachia and the South. Grandma soaked dried pinto beans overnight, then simmered them all day with a ham bone saved from Sunday's dinner, letting the marrow and meat scraps infuse the broth with smoky richness. She added nothing but salt, pepper, and maybe an onion quartered and thrown in whole. The beans cooked until creamy, their liquid thickening into rich pot liquor prized as much as the beans themselves. Meanwhile, cornbread baked in a preheated cast iron skillet, its bottom forming a golden crust from the hot bacon grease coating the pan. The combination provided complete protein, stretching a single ham bone into meals for 8 or more. Grandma never timed anything. She knew the beans were done by their appearance, the cornbread ready by its smell. This meal required only patience and the accumulated wisdom of generations who survived on exactly this. Tomato gravy started the same way sawmill gravy did. Bacon drippings in a hot skillet, a spoonful of flour stirred in. But where sawmill gravy reached for milk, tomato gravy reached for the canning jar. Home canned tomatoes, crushed by hand into the roux, turned the gravy a deep orange red and gave it a sweetness that the pepper-heavy sawmill version never had. A pinch of sugar went in if the tomatoes were too sharp, and the gravy cooked down until it was thick enough to sit on a split biscuit without running off the edges. Across the rural South through the 1940s and 50s, tomato gravy was breakfast, served alongside whatever the kitchen could produce: eggs if the hens were laying, a slice of cured ham if the smokehouse still had one. The color told you what kind of morning it was. Pale gravy meant milk was plentiful. Red gravy meant the cow had gone dry and the tomatoes were filling in. Cottage cheese and canned fruit became staple supper for seniors who needed protein without cooking effort and welcomed sweetness without dessert guilt. This combination required nothing more than spooning cottage cheese onto a plate and arranging canned peach halves, pear slices, or fruit cocktail alongside. The curds provided protein and calcium, while fruit offered vitamins and comfort of something sweet. During the 1950s and 60s, this was considered health food, recommended by doctors for patients needing gentle nourishment. The cottage cheese came in different curd sizes according to preference, and canned fruit ranged from budget brands to premium varieties. Some seniors added cinnamon or honey when company feelings struck. The cost remained minimal, since both ingredients kept well and stretched across multiple meals. Cottage cheese and canned fruit represented the intersection of economy and nutrition that practical seniors navigated daily, providing satisfaction without demanding time or energy. pork chop rice skillet was the kind of meal that simmered away while seniors rested in their chairs, filling small apartments with the aroma of home cooking. A single bone-in pork chop, often purchased on sale for mere cents per pound, was browned in a well-seasoned skillet until golden. Rice was added directly to the pan along with water or broth, and the whole thing was covered and left to cook slowly until the rice absorbed every drop of porky flavor. The meat became fork tender, practically falling off the bone, while the rice turned creamy and rich from the rendered fat. Some added a can of cream of mushroom soup to make it even more substantial, while others kept it simple with just salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. The dish required almost no attention once assembled, making it perfect for those with limited energy or mobility. One pork chop and a cup of rice fed a senior for an entire day, proving that economy and satisfaction could share the same plate. Baked ham with pineapple rings and maraschino cherries was the iconic centerpiece that defined American Christmas through the 1960s and 70s. The ham, usually a bone-in shank or butt portion, was scored in diamond patterns, each intersection studded with a whole clove that released fragrance as it baked. Canned pineapple rings were arranged across the surface and secured with toothpicks, a bright red cherry placed in each ring's center. Brown sugar and mustard glaze was brushed over everything, caramelizing into sticky sweetness that dripped down the sides. The presentation was unmistakably festive, the ham gleaming amber and gold under dining room lights. Slicing revealed pink meat with that distinctive ham flavor that paired perfectly with sweet glaze. Families served this alongside scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, and dinner rolls. The pineapple cherry ham has become a punchline today, dismissed as kitschy, but for millions it represented Christmas abundance and maternal love. Oven barbecue chicken legs were the sticky glory of weeknight dinners. They started with a pack of drumsticks, cheap, meaty, and always enough for everyone. The sauce came from a bottle, sweet and tangy, sometimes mixed with a splash of vinegar or brown sugar to make it taste homemade. The smell hit first, smoky, sweet, and slow-baked until the sauce turned thick and glossy. The skin crisped just right, caramelizing at the edges while the meat stayed tender underneath. It was a dinner made with no fuss, just trust in the oven's quiet work. The sound of that first bite, the pull of tender chicken against the glaze, was the sound of reward. Moms loved it because it fed many without costing much. It filled bellies, brought people to the table, and left sticky smiles behind. The kind of meal you lick your fingers after, grateful for the simple goodness of it all. The sauce left rings on the plates and napkins, proof of joy and appetite. The leftovers were even better, cold or reheated, eaten standing at the stove the next day. It was the kind of food that asked for nothing more than a paper towel and a moment of peace, the kind every working mother deserved. Venison backstrap with wild mushroom gravy was Christmas luxury harvested from November hunts and preserved for holiday feast. The backstrap was the tenderest deer cut, saved specifically for Christmas when families wanted something special. Hunters took their best bucks in late fall, field-dressed properly, and hung meat in cold sheds where December temperatures kept it fresh. The backstrap was sliced thick, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in hot cast iron to keep inside pink and tender. Wild mushrooms gathered in fall and dried were reconstituted and cooked into rich gravy using pan drippings, creating earthy depth complementing venison. In mountain communities, venison Christmas meant rifle skill, understanding deer movement, and respect for animals giving lives to feed families. This wasn't bought meat, but earned through cold mornings in tree stands. The backstrap melted on tongue, flavor clean and sweet. Families served it with potatoes and beans. Brown bread. Steamed pudding was a taste of New England's heart, dense, dark, and fragrant with molasses. Made from cornmeal, whole wheat flour, and buttermilk, it was steamed slowly in coffee cans or cloth bags, filling homes with warmth and spice. Each serving was soft, slightly sticky, and comforting, best eaten with butter or a drizzle of cream. For families enduring long, cold evenings, it was both dessert and sustenance. Its humble ingredients reflected a time when nothing was wasted and sweetness came from patience, not sugar. The flavor was deep and homey, carrying notes of brown sugar and earth. Once a Thanksgiving staple across rural kitchens, it has nearly vanished from modern tables. But for those who remember, it represents endurance, the kind that fed both body and spirit when times were lean. Brown bread, steamed pudding, was the quiet sweetness of gratitude itself. Oxtail ragu was one of those dinners that made something from nothing, which was exactly what families needed during the 1940s. Prime cuts of beef were rationed heavily, but oxtails were still available and often overlooked. Cooks knew how to turn that into an advantage, simmering the tails for hours until every bit of flavor seeped into the broth. The meat itself was tender and rich, but the real treasure was the gravy that came from the slow cooking process. Families would ladle it over rice, mashed potatoes, or even crusts of leftover bread. Nothing went to waste, and every spoonful felt like it was pulled from the hands of luxury, even though it came from scraps. The ragu became a true equalizer, showing that flavor was not tied to expensive ingredients, but to patience and creativity. Even today, the dish has an almost gourmet feel, though back then it was simply a way to stretch meat to feed everyone around the table. Baked peanut loaf with tomato glaze turned a humble pantry staple into a protein-rich dinner centerpiece. Ground peanuts, crushed into a coarse meal, were mixed with breadcrumbs, chopped onions, and a little powdered milk before being packed into a loaf pan. A thin glaze of tomato sauce spiked with cider vinegar was brushed over the top, then the loaf baked until firm and aromatic. Peanuts were inexpensive and widely available, offering vital protein when meat was scarce or ration stamps were gone. The nutty aroma filled the house as the loaf cooked, and families sliced it thick to serve with mashed potatoes or a handful of garden greens. Children often helped grind the peanuts with hand cranks, turning dinner preparation into an interactive chore. The sweet tang of the tomato glaze balanced the earthy flavor, making the dish surprisingly satisfying even for those accustomed to beef roasts. Baked peanut loaf proved that creativity and resourcefulness could turn an everyday snack into a memorable wartime meal that kept everyone at the table full and content. Creamed peas on toast turned a bag of frozen peas and a little flour into a fast dinner that warmed the evening. Butter melted in a skillet while a spoonful of flour was whisked in to make a smooth roux. Then milk streamed in to form a creamy sauce. The peas went straight from freezer to pan, bright green against the pale gravy as they softened and released their sweetness. Thick slices of bread toasted in the same pan or under a quick broiler became the foundation, soaking up the sauce while staying crisp at the edges. A sprinkle of black pepper and a pinch of nutmeg gave the dish surprising depth, proof that simple pantry ingredients could still feel indulgent. Families loved how it filled plates in less than 10 minutes and cost almost nothing, making it a dependable weeknight standby. Children liked the mild flavor and the fun of cutting through the soft bread with a fork, while adults found comfort in its quiet, creamy richness. One bite carried the memory of suppers built on thrift and ingenuity, a reminder that speed and satisfaction can share the same plate when time and money are scarce, but hunger is real. Number 16. Milk toast. You toasted 2 slices of stale white bread, dropped them in a wide bowl, heated a cup of milk just below a simmer, melted butter and sugar on the toast, then poured the hot milk over with a sprinkle of nutmeg. That was supper on a sick night in 1934. That was breakfast on a cold morning in 1947. Mark Twain ate it. Every grandmother in the Midwest made it for a child with a fever or a husband worn out from the late shift. The bread softened just enough to hold a spoon. The milk turned sweet from the butter melting under it. It cost less than a nickel a bowl. The genius was the staling. Day-old bread held the shape of a slice under hot milk. Fresh bread fell apart inside 90 seconds. Your grandmother set aside the heel of every loaf for milk toast, and that was how a kitchen wasted nothing across a generation. It still tastes like being loved. Number 18. Stuffed cabbage rolls. Boiled cabbage leaves wrapped around a filling of ground beef, ground pork, onion, and white rice, packed shoulder to shoulder in a deep pot, simmered for 2 hours in tomato sauce. Polish neighborhoods in Hamtramck and Buffalo called them golubki. Slovak families in Pittsburgh called them halupki. By the 1960s, the second generation had anglicized them to stuffed cabbage and served them on church basement tables every Friday during Lent. The dish was an immigrant inheritance that survived Ellis Island and 2 world wars. What it could not survive was the third generation moving to the suburbs and learning to call them weird. A retired mill worker in Cleveland still made 100 at a time and froze them in Maxwell House coffee cans. He died in 1991, and the recipe died with him. The grandchildren remembered the smell. They could not remember the proportions. The cabbage went back to coleslaw, the ground meat went into hamburgers, and the rice ended up in a side dish nobody named. And the dish became a memory of a smell instead of a recipe. Number 18 went from a Sunday tradition to a museum entry inside one generation. That was how fast a dinner could vanish. The box of rice-a-roni had been in American cabinets since 1958, and by the early 1960s, it had become the standard dinner for anyone cooking alone who wanted something that felt more like cooking than it was. The technique was everything. Melt butter in the skillet, add the dry rice and broken vermicelli from the box, and toast them together, stirring constantly until the pasta turned amber and the rice went translucent. Then water, then the seasoning packet, lid on, heat down. Those 2 minutes of dry toasting gave the dish a nutty depth that plain boiled rice never had. The step people who didn't know the rule always skipped, wondering later why theirs tasted flat. Golden Grain Company developed the original in San Francisco, after co-founder Vince DeDomenico watched a neighbor combine rice and pasta in the early 1950s. 19 cents a box. You could eat it plain. You could pull in a leftover chicken thigh and call it a proper dinner. Either way, it was ready before you finished changing out of your work clothes. If rice-a-roni was what you made when the cabinet was stocked, it sounds like a mistake until you eat it. Apricot jam and dry onion soup mix poured over raw chicken pieces and nothing else. No broth, no extra seasoning. The jam melts and spreads thin across the skin, and the dehydrated onion blooms in the moisture the meat releases. By the 40-minute mark, the dish has lacquered itself, the jam reducing to something close to a restaurant glaze, the chicken underneath bronze and pull-apart tender. The sweet and savory logic, fruit with poultry balanced by salt, is as old as medieval European cooking. But nobody at the counter with a jar of Smuckers and a packet of Lipton was thinking about that. They were thinking about dinner, and what they landed on tasted like more effort than it was. The dish arrived in American kitchens through the 1970s and 80s, when shelf-stable condiments made complicated-tasting meals possible without anything being fresh. Open 2 things, pour them over chicken, and sit down to something that looked like you meant it. Cornmeal mush and molasses was the breakfast that cost almost nothing but provided everything a body needed to face hard work. Grandma would boil water in a heavy pot, then slowly stream coarse cornmeal into the bubbling liquid while stirring constantly with a wooden spoon worn smooth from decades of use. The mixture had to cook slowly, requiring patience to prevent lumps or scorching. When it reached the right thickness, something only her hands knew, she spooned it steaming into bowls and drizzled thick blackstrap molasses over the top. The combination of corn's earthiness and molasses' mineral-rich sweetness created something that tasted like sustenance itself. Children ate it before school. Men ate it before dawn chores. The leftover mush was poured into loaf pans, chilled until firm, sliced, and fried in bacon grease for supper. Nothing was wasted. The dish demanded no recipe because the proportions lived in muscle memory, passed from grandmother to mother to daughter through watching, not reading. Sawmill gravy got its name in the lumber camps of the late 1800s, where cooks fed crews of men using nothing but flour, grease, milk, and black pepper in quantities large enough to fill a washtub. The gravy was thick, pale, peppery, and poured over anything that held still: biscuits, toast, cornbread, fried potatoes. You started with a few spoonfuls of bacon drippings in a hot skillet, stirred in flour until it turned golden and smelled like toasted grain, then poured in milk slowly while scraping the bottom of the pan. The whole process took less than 10 minutes and fed a household for pennies. Some cooks called it bulldog gravy, and in the coal camps of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, it showed up at every meal, breakfast, dinner, and supper, because the mines paid low and the company store charged high. The pepper had to bite. If you couldn't feel the pepper, the gravy wasn't finished. She made it by sound. The sizzle of flour hitting grease told her everything a recipe never could. Sardines on crackers represented pantry cooking at its most practical, requiring nothing more than opening a tin and arranging contents on whatever crackers were at hand. For seniors living alone during the 1960s and 70s, this combination offered complete protein and essential oils without any cooking whatsoever. The tiny fish came packed in oil, water, or mustard sauce depending on preference, and a single tin stretched across 2 meals when appetite was small. Saltine crackers were the traditional base, their neutral flavor providing contrast to the rich, briny fish. Some seniors added lemon juice or hot sauce to brighten flavors. Others mashed the sardines with a fork, creating a spread that distributed more evenly. The entire meal cost pennies and provided nutrients doctors recommended for aging bodies. Sardines on crackers were consumed at kitchen tables by people who understood that dignity in dining came from adequacy, not extravagance. Fried cabbage and sausage was a one-pan wonder that stretched a single link of smoked sausage into a meal that fed body and soul alike. Cabbage cost almost nothing and kept for weeks in the refrigerator, making it a staple for seniors watching their budgets. The sausage was sliced into coins and browned until the fat rendered out. Then shredded cabbage was added and cooked until wilted and slightly caramelized. The cabbage absorbed the smoky, porky flavor from the drippings, transforming from a humble vegetable into something deeply satisfying. A splash of vinegar or a sprinkle of caraway seeds added complexity without adding cost. The dish came together in under 20 minutes and required nothing more than a cutting board and a skillet. One small head of cabbage and one sausage link created enough food for 3 meals, making it extraordinarily economical. The sweetness of the cooked cabbage balanced the salty richness of the sausage perfectly, proving that poverty cooking could produce genuinely delicious results. Roast duck with orange sauce was the continental-inspired dish that sophisticated families served to demonstrate their worldly tastes. The duck was pricked all over to release fat, then roasted slowly until the skin turned impossibly crisp while the meat stayed moist. Orange sauce was made from scratch, combining fresh juice, zest, stock, and sometimes Grand Marnier into something bright that balanced the rich meat. The presentation was classic. Sliced duck breast fanned across plates, sauce drizzled artfully, orange segments providing color. This was aspirational cooking, inspired by French restaurants and Julia Child's television appearances. Duck required more skill than turkey or chicken, its higher fat content demanding different techniques. The dish represented cultural ambition, families embracing international cuisine as a mark of sophistication. Today, duck rarely appears on home Christmas tables, reserved for restaurants where few experience its former holiday glory. Chicken spaghetti was the kind of meal that made everyone pause and smile when the oven door opened. It was creamy, cheesy, and colorful, made with shredded chicken, chopped bell peppers, and a can or two of condensed soup that stretched flavor farther than anyone expected. The spaghetti went in soft, tangled in sauce until it turned into a rich casserole that could feed a crowd with ease. The cheese bubbled on top, golden and stringy, the sort that clung to every forkful. It was the definition of a working mother's magic, quick, practical, and somehow perfect every time. Kids loved it because it was warm and familiar. Adults loved it because it made leftovers worth looking forward to. It was not fancy food, but it was family food, built to comfort after long days and long weeks. It said, "You are home now." Every bite was a reminder that love could be creamy and baked, tucked into the shape of a casserole. The recipe lived in every small-town kitchen, written on note cards smudged with sauce and fingerprints. It could feed 6 or 10 or more, depending on what needed stretching. Some added mushrooms, others a handful of peas, and every family claimed their way was best. But no matter the version, the smell of bubbling cheese and pepper always meant one thing. The day was done and dinner was taken care of. Stack cake with dried apple filling was Christmas dessert requiring community cooperation and weeks of preparation. This wasn't ordinary cake, but thin layers stacked with dried apple filling, creating towering centerpiece feeding dozens. Women began drying apples in late summer, slicing thin and laying on screens until leathery. Come Christmas, apples were rehydrated and cooked with molasses and cinnamon until thick. The cake layers were simple: flour, lard, molasses, spices, rolled thin and baked separately. Assembly was ceremony, each layer placed and spread with apple mixture. The cake sat for days, letting flavors meld into something slicing clean and tasting like autumn. In mountain communities, stack cake represented cooperation because neighbors often brought layers to celebrations. The finished cake stood tall, dark layers visible through golden apple filling. This represented mountain Christmas, patient, cooperative, deeply satisfying. Celery and olive relish trays were once the quiet opening act of every Thanksgiving feast. Before the turkey, before the sides, came the cool crunch of celery stuffed with pimento cheese or cream cheese and the briny bite of olives. They offered a balance, freshness, before the richness to come. Housewives prided themselves on arranging them neatly, often on cut glass trays. Children would sneak olives off the plate, pretending not to like them but always coming back for more. It was a simple tradition, but one that marked the beginning of the meal with grace and order. Over time, the relish tray faded, replaced by charcuterie boards and modern appetizers. Yet it remains a symbol of hospitality from a slower, more deliberate age. Celery and olive relish trays were Thanksgiving's crisp, elegant overture. Potato and peanut soup might sound unusual today, but in the 1940s it was a clever way to combine two inexpensive ingredients into something nourishing. Potatoes were one of the most reliable crops during rationing, and peanuts offered protein when meat was scarce. Together, they made a hearty supper that was both filling and comforting. The soup was simmered slowly so that the peanuts would soften and release their flavor into the broth, thickening it into a rich base. Housewives often added onions, carrots, or celery if they had them, making it a meal that could feed an entire family from very little. The dish was not flashy, but it was dependable and thrifty, and that is what mattered most during hard times. For children who disliked the taste of organ meats or bitter greens, this soup offered a more familiar flavor while still delivering nutrition. Today, it has disappeared from most kitchens, but for families in the 1940s, potato and peanut soup was one of those life-saving recipes that kept everyone satisfied. Ginger-spiced carrot fritters were a lively surprise on dinner plates otherwise filled with muted wartime flavors. Grated carrots mixed with flour, a little powdered milk, and chopped preserved ginger formed a bright orange batter that sizzled in the skillet. Families grated every last carrot from their victory gardens, knowing the vegetable provided both color and much-needed vitamins. Preserved ginger added a warmth that made the fritters taste far more indulgent than the ingredients suggested. Mothers loved them because they cooked quickly and used almost no precious fats when fried in a thin layer of reused drippings. Children loved them because the sweet spice cut through the earthy carrot flavor and made vegetables exciting. Some home cooks sprinkled a bit of sugar on top for a faint candy-like crust, while others served the fritters beside a simple cabbage salad for balance. In many communities, these fritters became a Sunday treat, a small reminder that even in the midst of rationing there was room for a touch of playful flavor and cheerful color on the family table. Skillet hot dogs with onions and peppers brought the flavor of a street cart into the kitchen without the need for a grill. Hot dogs were scored and browned in a cast-iron pan, while sliced onions and bell peppers sautéed beside them in a little butter and salt. The vegetables softened and caramelized, releasing a sweetness that mingled with the smoky scent of the searing meat. Split rolls were toasted directly in the same pan to catch every bit of flavor. In less than 10 minutes, the hot dogs were nestled into the warm bread and piled high with the pepper and onion mixture, a quick dinner that felt indulgent and hearty. Families loved the one-pan cleanup and the way the dish fed a group with minimal effort. Each bite carried the taste of summer fairs and city sidewalks, proving that even a humble hot dog can become a meal worth remembering when time is short and hunger is strong. Number 23. Tomato soup cake. You measured a can of Campbell's condensed tomato soup straight into the mixing bowl, and you got a spice cake out of the oven that nobody could place. The recipe showed up in community cookbooks around 1928, when eggs and milk were too expensive, and the soup did the work of dairy. The cake came out moist and dense, with a cinnamon and clove crumb that tasted like a campfire spice cake. Campbell's started printing the recipe on the soup label in 1960. Your great-aunt frosted it with cream cheese, served it on a Sunday plate, and let your uncle ask 3 times what kind of cake it was. She never told. The tomato acid activated the baking soda and gave the cake a tight crumb you cannot get with milk. The genius was always the sleight of hand. Nobody at the table knew they were eating a soup can. Number 20. Tuna noodle casserole. A can of chicken of the sea, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, a bag of egg noodles, a handful of frozen peas, and a crushed potato chip topping baked until the edges browned. A 1959 Federal Fisheries survey found that 8 out of 10 American households served canned tuna once a week, and the casserole sat at the top of that list. Through the 1960s, it was the dish a working mother slid into the oven before she changed out of her work clothes. The whole thing cost about 90 cents and fed 5. Picture the smell of cream of mushroom hitting the egg noodles in a galley kitchen in Wichita on a Tuesday in 1966. It survives in church potlucks but rarely on weeknight tables. The frozen peas have been replaced by takeout, the noodles by penny, and the casserole by nothing in particular. The recipe is still on the back of the Campbell's can. Almost nobody reads the back of the can anymore. Before Hamburger Helper arrived in 1971, people stretching ground beef into a full dinner were already doing it themselves. And in New England, they'd called the result American chop suey for decades, a name with nothing to do with Chinese food and everything to do with the Depression-era habit of giving humble dishes whatever label made dinner sound more interesting. Brown the beef with diced onion, pour in undiluted Campbell's tomato soup and a can of water, bring to a simmer, drop in dry elbow macaroni right in the skillet, stir for 20 minutes. The Encyclopedia of American Food and Drink traces chop suey in American usage to the late 19th century, but the elbow mac version became the signature of New England working-class cooking in the post-war years. The Midwest called it American goulash. Parts of the South called it macaroni red. It fed whoever needed feeding, by whatever name, and left the pot easy to wash. When cooking alone, that mattered almost as much as the eating. Stuffed bell peppers were a Depression-era solution to making ground beef and rice feel like more than ground beef and rice. You halved the peppers and they became free vessels, grown in the backyard or bought for pennies. And the same modest filling suddenly had shape and occasion. Raw ground beef mixed with uncooked rice, onion, salt, and tomato sauce, packed into the pepper halves, stood upright in a baking dish with a half-inch of water and more sauce poured over the top. Covered at 350, the steam inside did all the work. Rice cooked from trapped moisture, beef set firm, the pepper wall softened to tender. During the 1930s, when beef cost around 18 cents a pound and garden peppers came free all summer, this was the dish that made a weeknight feel like a real meal. Your grandmother may have served 2 halves with a glass of milk and nothing else. That was enough. She knew it was, and she set the table the same way regardless. Fried salt pork and milk gravy was the morning-to-night staple that sustained farming families through endless days of labor. Grandma would slice thick pieces of cured pork belly, fry them slowly in cast iron until the edges curled crispy and the fat rendered into liquid gold. The meat was set aside while she worked magic with that hot grease, whisking in flour until it turned golden brown, then pouring in fresh milk from the morning's milking. She stirred constantly until the gravy thickened into something creamy and rich, seasoned with nothing but pepper and instinct. This gravy was ladled over biscuits at breakfast, potatoes at dinner, cornbread at supper. The salt pork provided protein and fat that kept bodies warm through hay, baling, and tobacco cutting. It was never fancy, but it was filling and made entirely from ingredients the farm provided. The skill was in knowing exactly when the flour had cooked enough, when the gravy had reached perfect consistency. Knowledge that lived only in a grandmother's hands. Cornmeal mush was exactly what it sounded like. Cornmeal stirred slowly into boiling water until it thickened into a dense, porridge-like mass. But the real meal came the next morning, when the leftover mush had been poured into a loaf pan and left to set firm in the cold. You sliced it thick, laid the slices in a skillet with hot grease, and fried them until both sides turned golden and crisp, while the center stayed soft and creamy. Cherokee communities had been cooking cornmeal this way long before German-American settlers in the Appalachian foothills adopted the technique, a practice that showed up in household records from Western Virginia and the Carolinas as far back as the 1700s. Topped with sorghum syrup or a drizzle of honey, fried mush was breakfast and supper depending on the household, and the overnight wait was the whole secret. Fresh mush fell apart in the skillet. You had to let the cold do the work. Patience was the ingredient that never made it into the recipe. Stewed tomatoes on toast brought garden flavor to supper tables using canned tomatoes that cost pennies and required almost no preparation. Seniors who had canned their own tomatoes during summer or purchased store brands during lean times understood this humble ingredient's versatility. The tomatoes were heated in a small saucepan with butter, salt, sugar, and sometimes torn bread pieces that thickened the liquid into something approaching sauce. This warm mixture was spooned over buttered toast that soaked up the juices gratefully. The combination provided vitamins, fiber, and comfort of something warm and savory. Some seniors added black pepper or Worcestershire sauce to deepen flavors. Others kept things simple, letting tomatoes speak for themselves. The dish appeared on tables across America during decades when making do meant making delicious from almost nothing. Stewed tomatoes on toast proved that a can of tomatoes and bread slice could become something worth sitting down to eat properly. Chili mac skillet was comfort food that came together in a single pan and satisfied cravings for something hearty and warming. Ground beef was browned with onions, then chili powder, cumin, and a can of tomatoes transformed the mixture into something boldly flavored. Elbow macaroni was added directly to the skillet, along with enough water to cook the pasta, and the whole thing simmered until the noodles were tender and had absorbed the spiced tomato liquid. Shredded cheese melted over the top created strings of gooey richness that made each bite feel indulgent. The dish was adaptable. Kidney beans could be added for extra protein, corn for sweetness, or extra chili powder for those who liked heat. A single skillet of chili mac fed one person for 3 meals, making it both economical and practical for seniors living alone. The combination of protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables in one dish meant balanced nutrition without preparing multiple components. Chili mac was honest, filling, and exactly what a cold evening demanded. Creamed onions were the pearly white side dish that appeared in silver serving bowls at Christmas dinners across America, their mild sweetness balanced by rich bechamel. Small pearl onions were peeled by hand, a tedious job that left cooks weeping but yielded incomparable results. The onions were simmered until just tender, then folded into a sauce of butter, flour, cream, and sometimes a touch of nutmeg that coated each pearl in velvety richness. The finished dish looked almost like a dessert, the pale onions glistening in their creamy bath. Families passed the bowl around the table, spooning modest portions alongside roast beef or turkey. The flavor was subtle, the onions sweet and soft against the rich sauce. Making creamed onions from scratch required patience and skill, the sauce needing constant attention to prevent lumps. By the 1980s, frozen pearl onions and canned cream soups had replaced the handmade version, and eventually the dish vanished entirely from most Christmas tables. Chili mac was what happened when leftovers became a second chance. It started with last night's chili, thick, spicy, and still holding its heat, stirred into freshly boiled elbow macaroni until it became something new entirely. The cheese, if there was any left in the fridge, went on top, melting just enough to hold everything together. The dish was quick, cheap, and full of life, a perfect fix for nights when time ran out and hunger could not wait. Kids loved it because it felt like comfort in a bowl. Moms loved it because it meant nothing was wasted. Every spoonful was hearty, familiar, and full of flavor that felt earned. It was thrift made joyful, proof that leftovers were not the end of the meal but the start of another. In homes where every dollar counted, Chili Mac stretched both food and gratitude farther than anyone thought possible. It was the weeknight hero of kitchen tables across America. Easy, satisfying, and always ready to save the day. The scent of chili mixed with noodles was as real as laughter, and every bite tasted like togetherness. It was what family looked like: messy, warm, and enough for everyone. Possum roasted with sweet potatoes was Christmas dinner that filled mountain families with pride. These weren't desperate meals, but traditional feasts prepared with care. The possums were caught in late fall after feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving meat surprisingly sweet flavor. The cleaning was meticulous, with possums scrubbed thoroughly and parboiled to remove wild taste. Then they were stuffed with sweet potatoes, onions, and herbs before slow roasting in Dutch ovens. The sweet potatoes absorbed rich juices while skin turned crispy golden. In North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia hollows, Possum Christmas meant honoring traditions stretching back generations. Grandmothers taught daughters proper preparation, passing knowledge connecting families to ancestors. The meat was tender and slightly sweet. Served with cornbread and greens, this was mountain fine dining representing cultural identity stronger than judgment. Corn pudding was the comfort food that defined rural Thanksgiving tables. Fresh or canned corn mixed with milk, butter, and eggs created a soft, custard-like bake that melted in your mouth. Its sweetness was subtle, its texture soothing. Farmers' families loved it because it stretched easily. Cheap ingredients made rich by care. It smelled of harvest season and family warmth, served steaming beside turkey and greens. Every spoonful carried the golden taste of cornfields and patience. Some versions added a hint of nutmeg, others relied on pure simplicity. Corn pudding wasn't flashy, but it was dependable, a side dish that grounded the feast. As boxed mixes and fast foods took over, this quiet favorite faded away. But those who grew up with it know that no modern casserole can replace its gentle charm. Corn pudding was humble abundance baked to perfection. Stuffed eggplant became a practical way to make a hearty dinner with very little meat. Eggplants were inexpensive and easy to grow in gardens, which made them accessible during the shortages of the 1940s. The vegetable was halved, scooped out, and filled with mixtures of rice, breadcrumbs, cheese scraps, and small amounts of ground meat if available. The filling was then baked until golden, and the eggplant shells became edible bowls. Families appreciated the way this dish could feed many with very little. It was also adaptable, with endless variations based on whatever was in the pantry. Sometimes it was entirely meatless, other times it was enriched with leftover ham or sausage. Either way, it offered warmth, nutrition, and variety during years when dinners often felt repetitive. Today, stuffed eggplant is more associated with Mediterranean cuisines, but in the 1940s it was firmly planted on American tables as a clever way to stretch supplies. Corn husk tamale pie blended Mexican-American tradition with the frugality of wartime home cooking. Cooks lined a deep pan with softened corn husks, pressing in a crust made from cornmeal mixed with lard or bacon drippings. A filling of pinto beans, diced garden vegetables, and whatever scraps of meat could be spared was poured inside before another layer of cornmeal sealed the dish. The pie baked until the crust became golden and fragrant, while the husks imparted a gentle earthiness. This dinner traveled from the Southwest to kitchens across the country, thanks to traveling families and wartime recipe exchanges. It was hearty enough to feed several mouths and required no ration stamps for exotic ingredients. Children loved peeling away the husks to find the steaming filling inside, turning the meal into a small event. The corn husk tamale pie stood as a testament to how immigrant food traditions enriched American tables, even during a time when every household was forced to stretch every grain and vegetable to its fullest potential. Salisbury steak patties with gravy mix offered a hearty plate in minutes, transforming ground beef into something that tasted like a slow Sunday supper. Lean beef was seasoned with onion powder, garlic, and a splash of Worcestershire, then shaped into oval patties and seared in a skillet until crisp on the outside and juicy inside. While the meat browned, a packet of instant brown gravy whisked together with water created a smooth sauce in a separate pan. Once the patties were done, they were nestled into the bubbling gravy for a final simmer that coated them in rich flavor. Served over mashed potatoes or buttered toast, the meal felt far more elaborate than the clock revealed. Working parents loved the speed and the hearty comfort, while children scooped up every drop of gravy with the last crust of bread. It was a dinner that turned a simple pound of beef into something warm, filling, and memorable, the kind of dish that proves convenience and care can live on the same plate. Number 24, Depression Spaghetti. You opened a bottle of ketchup and you opened a box of pasta, and that was the entire grocery list. The home cooks of the 1930s figured out that sugar, vinegar, and tomato puree were the three things that made marinara taste like marinara, and ketchup already had all three. You boiled the noodles, drained them, stirred in half a bottle of ketchup, and you had a plate that looked like Italian food on a budget that did not. A Japanese chef in 1945 watched American GIs eat C-ration spaghetti and invented Neapolitan, still on Tokyo menus today. Down in Haiti, they make breakfast spaghetti with ketchup, sausage, and pepper. One cheap idea, three countries, all feeding workers. The bare-bones version fed millions across 2 decades. Number 15, Beef Stroganoff over noodles. A pound of sirloin tips browned hard in a skillet, finished with sliced mushrooms and a pan sauce of beef broth, mustard, and a half pint of sour cream stirred in off the heat. Spooned over wide egg noodles. The dish came home with American GIs from Europe and entered the home cooking magazines by 1955. Through the 1960s, every Betty Crocker cookbook had a version. It was Saturday night dinner before company arrived. Fancy enough to feel like a treat, fast enough to make in 40 minutes. The sour cream curdled if the heat got too high. Mothers warned daughters about that one over the phone. By the time Hamburger Helper arrived in 1971 with a powdered version, the from-scratch dish was already retreating to special occasions. Today, it has retreated all the way out of the rotation. The can of corned beef hash told you nothing useful. Dense, brick red, smelling faintly of iron. Anyone meeting it for the first time would have reservations. The people who knew it understood one rule: put it in the skillet and leave it alone. Crumble in with diced onion, spread flat, press lightly, and abandon for 8 full minutes while a dark crust builds on the bottom. Turn once, one time only, let the other side catch. With an egg on top, it was a complete dinner for under a quarter. Armour was the standard, about 19 cents a can in the 1960s. The men who lived on it, the widowers, the newly divorced, the ones on a hot plate in a furnished room, would tell you it tasted fine. Some would tell you it tasted exactly like getting through the week. The egg on top was what made it worth sitting down for. She never diluted the soup. That was the thing most people got wrong when they tried to copy it. They thinned the can, and the noodles came out swimming instead of coated. The real method: bone-in chicken thighs straight into the casserole dish, dry egg noodles scattered around them without pre-cooking, and the cream of mushroom soup poured undiluted, the whole thick can, over the top, then cover tight. By the time the oven finished, the noodles had pulled up every bit of that condensed soup, and the chicken skins rendered fat. Campbell's began publishing casserole recipes from their condensed soups in 1941, and this dump-and-bake logic became the foundation of how a generation of women fed families without measuring and without writing anything down for whoever came after. You can follow the method exactly. Whatever she added, the decision to leave the skin on, the extra crack of pepper before the foil went down, went with her, and no amount of trying will bring it fully back. Squirrel and gravy was the hunter's reward that turned small game into sustenance when store-bought meat was a luxury. Grandpa would bring home squirrels cleaned and ready, and Grandma would cut them into pieces, dredge them in seasoned flour, and fry them slowly in lard until golden brown and tender. The meat was removed while she made gravy in the same skillet, stirring flour into the drippings and adding milk until it thickened into something rich with wild flavor. Squirrel meat was darker than chicken, slightly gamey, but absolutely delicious when prepared by hands that knew what they were doing. The gravy stretched the meal, ladled over biscuits and rice to feed a family from just 2 or 3 small animals. This dish appeared throughout fall and winter when squirrels were fat and plentiful in the hickory groves. No recipe existed because none was needed. Countrywomen knew how to fry meat and make gravy the way they knew how to breathe. It was survival cooking elevated to something genuinely delicious. The jar of bacon grease beside the stove was the most important ingredient in the kitchen, and nobody who grew up in these houses ever threw it away. Fried potatoes and onions cooked in saved bacon grease was a meal that appeared on tables across the Appalachian South 3 or 4 nights a week. Potatoes sliced thin, a rough chopped onion, and a heavy spoonful of drippings from that jar, all pressed flat in a cast iron skillet and cooked without stirring until the bottom turned golden and crisp. You flipped it in sections, not all at once, and the onions went sweet and dark against the edges of the potatoes. In the 1950s, a 10-pound bag of potatoes cost around 35 cents, and a single bag could stretch across a full week of suppers. The grease was free, saved from breakfast, from Sunday's fatback, from every strip of bacon that ever touched that pan. Nobody measured. You scooped until the skillet looked right. That instinct died with the women who owned those jars. Buttered noodles satisfied hunger with the simplest combination of starch, fat, and salt, asking nothing of the cook beyond boiling water. Seniors living alone during the 1960s and 70s kept boxes of egg noodles in their pantries for evenings when cooking felt like too much, but hunger insisted on attention. The noodles were boiled until tender, drained thoroughly, then returned to the warm pot where butter was added along with generous salt and pepper. The butter melted into warm pasta, coating each strand with glossy richness that tasted more indulgent than ingredients suggested. Some added dried parsley for color or grated cheese when budget allowed. The entire preparation took under 10 minutes and produced a bowl of comfort that filled empty stomachs without taxing limited energy. Buttered noodles were honest food that never pretended to be more than what they were. For seniors eating alone, this simple dish provided warmth on nights when elaborate cooking was impossible. Tomato gravy over rice was Southern poverty food that generations of seniors relied upon when the pantry was nearly bare, but dinner still needed to happen. The gravy started with bacon drippings heated in a skillet, then flour was stirred in to create a roux that cooked until golden. Canned tomatoes were added along with water to create a gravy that was tangy, rich, and deeply comforting. Sugar balanced the acidity while salt and pepper brought everything into focus. Poured over a mound of white rice, this simple combination became a meal that satisfied hunger without straining the budget. A single can of tomatoes and a cup of rice fed one person for 2 days, making it one of the most economical dinners possible. The dish carried memories of harder times, of grandmothers who knew how to make something from nothing. For seniors eating alone, tomato gravy over rice was both nostalgia and nourishment in a single skillet, proof that comfort could be measured in the simplest ingredients prepared with care. Crown roast of pork was the showstopper centerpiece that announced a family's prosperity and a mother's skill the moment guests entered the dining room. Butchers would French the rib bones and curve them into a majestic crown shape, each bone tip adorned with a paper frill that made the roast look almost too elegant to eat. The center was filled with savory stuffing, often bread-based with apples, onions, and sage, that cooked inside the meat, absorbing all those rich pork juices. Families ordered these roasts weeks in advance from local butchers who knew exactly how to prepare them. The presentation was theatrical, carried to the table on the best silver platter while everyone gasped and applauded. Carving required precision, with the host carefully separating each chop while keeping the crown intact as long as possible. The meat was succulent, the stuffing rich, and the experience unforgettable. Crown roast represented an era when Christmas dinner was performance as much as meal, when presentation mattered deeply. Chicken cornbread casserole was the kind of dish that waited patiently in every mother's recipe box, ready to rescue a tired evening. It began with shredded chicken, often left over from Sunday dinner, mixed into a can of cream soup, and seasoned with just enough salt and pepper to taste like comfort itself. Over that went the cornbread mix, sweetened slightly, poured on thick, and baked until it rose golden and fragrant. The oven did most of the work while the kids finished homework or the washing machine spun in the next room. When it came out, The smell filled the house with something that felt like gratitude, buttery, warm, and steady. Slicing into it meant the end of a long day. The filling was creamy, soft, and rich from the soup, while the top was firm and crumbly in the best way. It was a small miracle of convenience and care, the kind of food that made you feel seen after a shift, after errands, after everything life could throw. Moms knew it was dependable. A casserole that did not need measuring cups, only memory. It fed everyone, left no one hungry, and always felt special even though it came from the simplest ingredients. This was not fast food. It was fast love, baked golden in a single pan. Wild rabbit in brown gravy was the Christmas centerpiece mountain families harvested from snowy hillsides. These were wild cottontails tracked through December snow, caught in box traps or shot cleanly. The rabbits were skinned carefully, jointed, and browned slowly in pork fat until golden. They simmered for hours with wild onions and black pepper until meat fell off the bone. The cooking liquid became rich gravy thickened with flour. Families served this over biscuits or alongside stored potatoes. In eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, wild rabbit meant Christmas protein that cost nothing, just skill and land knowledge. Children learned holiday meals came from work, not stores. The meat was tender and mild, each piece representing winter mornings spent hunting. This represented self-reliance and connection between mountain people and their environment, proving Christmas abundance didn't require money when you had resourcefulness pass through generations. These dinners did not disappear because we got better at cooking. They disappeared because the mother who knew the recipe started working 2 jobs. The daughter ordered pizza. The granddaughter scrolled past the can of mushroom soup at the grocery store without recognizing the label. A casserole was once how a family said grace without using words. Now it is a museum piece on a recipe blog, the crushed potato chip topping outliving the dinner it sat on by a generation.